5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And with that, welcome to your Media Mosh podcast. I am your host, Shane Beauregard, coming at you with all your news, reviews, and previews to watch on your streaming services and your television. I hope everyone's having a great day out there. May the 4th be with everybody. Yes, today is May 4th, the official Star Wars Day, which means absolutely nothing to me, but I know it does to a lot of people out there. So even though Star Wars has been off the rails for the last 20 years, hey, there's still some good ones in there. Oh, man. I hope everyone's doing all right out there. I don't even know what day or week it is anymore. Everything is totally meshed into each other. And last week was the first week it kind of hit me. Some days I just started, I started to unravel just a little bit. So I decided to get through the week. And honestly, you know how I like to be honest with everybody on this show. I started recording Saturday night and I just got this. There's no other way to put it. I was just fucking too hammered, just way too hammered. I got like 10 minutes in and I wasn't even coherent anymore at that point. So I closed up shop, regrouped, and here I am. You would think though, during this quarantine time, since I am home now, I am the Tony Danza of my household, that I would have more time. I would have ample time to sit here and record, but that is not the case. That's not the case. My days is littered full of schoolwork, kids, and the whole Tony Danza thing. That's not a joke for now. That's just the way it is, and I don't mind it. But my point is, at the end of the day, I'm just so out of it, I just go to bed. And honestly, since this quarantine has started, my days have been littered just with kid show after kid show after kid show. So it is what it is, folks. But we will push on. We will move forward. And this is what we're going to do tonight. So the little news I do have for you, it was confirmed today, since it is Star Wars Day, that Taika Waititi is in fact going to make a Star Wars movie. Let's just hope they leave him alone and let him do his thing. Okay, don't do what you did with the other directors you brought on, and then you had to bring in Ron Howard and do tons of reshoots. So just leave the creative directors alone and let's see what they come up with. Yes, you might get a Last Jedi. I understand that. I totally get it. But you may get something great, kind of like Thor Ragnarok. So let's see where he takes the Star Wars franchise. Nick Cage is going to be cast as that redneck that's in that Tiger show on Netflix. I forget the name. Everyone in America has seen it. Tiger King. Yeah, whatever the fucking guy's name is, Nick Cage is going to play him. You know my affinity towards Nicolas Cage. But even him being in a show or movie about this jack-off, I am not going to watch it. I can't do it. So that's coming down the pipe. HBO Max is being launched this month, May 27th. Oscars, and this is a no-brainer. They kind of have to loosen up their rules. They are going to allow streaming movies to be allowed in their nominations this year. But unfortunately, I can't think of any great streaming movies I've seen this year. There have not been any great ones. There have been some solid ones. There's been some good ones, but nothing that even evokes the word Oscars. I just don't see it so far. So, just off the top of my head, and this is before the movie shut down, Invisible Man was probably one of the best movies I saw this year. And that's not saying a lot. I mean, it was good, but that's not saying a lot. I don't think it's Oscar worthy. So the other big news that happened last week is AMC is not going to allow Universal movies to play in their theaters once we get back to a normal day-to-day. And then Regal, who I had my membership through, said the same thing. Now, ultimately, does that bother me? No. Because what does that mean? I can't go see Fast and Furious 11 at the movie theaters? That's fine. I could wait to rent that shit from Redbox. But no, in all seriousness, I have to laugh because we're so early in this. This situation reminds me of the Sony Marvel Peter Parker or Spider-Man situation where Sony got the rights back and they were going to pull them from any further Marvel use. And what happened at the end of the day? Cooler heads prevailed and Sony let Spider-Man be back in the MCU. So I see very similar paths here. This all stemmed from a comment the Universal CEO said about the Trolls around the world being released on video on demand, saying they kind of made as much money as they would have if it was released in the theater. I don't know why that would have got anyone's panties in a bunch, but it obviously did. But I think by the time theaters open up and we get back to things, it may take some time, but Universal movies will actually be shown in these theaters. I mean, they would have to at some point, I would imagine. But it's funny because outside of Fast and Furious, I really can't think of any big-time Universal franchises. I know Invisible Man was or is Universal, but outside that, I don't really know. So this week, I decided to take it a little easy on myself, and I know I'm kind of backtracking, but I was coming off my last week's rant about me losing it. I decided I'm going to take a teacher workday this week. That's right. I am taking a fucking day off. I'm going to let my kids do whatever the hell they want. And lately, and I hate to sound like this guy, but I've been letting my kids have more computer time because after they get done with their schoolwork, they still have like 8 hours with me. So my daughter's into Minecraft right now. My son's kind of into Minecraft, but anytime he can get on a computer, he's fine. I know that's lazy parenting, but that's the kind of parenting I'm into right now. They will be locked into that stuff for a good hour. So that gives me some time to do some things. So anyway, let's tell you what's coming out on Prime. Amazon Prime this month. You have, and this is for me personally, there are some shows I missed the boat on. I missed the whole boat on Alias. So Amazon Prime is releasing the entire catalog of Alias shows, seasons 1 through 5, this week. You also, later in the month, have Homecoming Season 2, and that's an entirely different cast. So no, Julie Roberts is not in this Homecoming series. And then you have the Rocket Man movie. Coming out on Netflix, you have Seinfeld is dropping a comedy special, 23 Hours to Kill. You also have Patton Oswalt dropping a comedy series as well. Coming out on the 6th, you have Working Moms I believe they're in season 5, release 4. Coming out on the 8th, you have The Hollow season 2, which is an animated kids show. I would say young teens. It's a very interesting series if you haven't seen The Hollow. If you have a young adult or my daughter's age who's like 9, it's a very interesting show. I actually got into it myself. It's not your typical cartoon kind of show. It's hard for me to explain right now because I really haven't put much thought into it, but it's just a different kind of show. Then you have the Christina Applegate Dead to Me Season 2. I cannot wait to dive into that. Later on in the month, you have the Steve Carell Space Force, and you have the Adam Sandler Uncut Gems, which I had no idea was going to Netflix, but it is. So look for that later on in the month. And before I forget, because I just read this before coming on air, the New Mutants. That's right. That was supposed to come out in 2012. I thought it was coming to Disney Plus. Well, technically, it was supposed to come in the theaters in April. So obviously that didn't happen. Everyone assumed Disney Plus was going to end up picking it up. But I read where it's coming to Amazon streaming, and it's PG-13 instead of rated R. I don't care at this point. I just want to see it. Yes, I'm one of the few people who want to see this movie. I don't care how bad it is. It cannot be Last Phoenix bad or that last fucking X-Men movie. That was the worst. That was worse than The Last Stand. It cannot be that bad. I believe it's going to be a mess, but it's going to be a mess that I like. And I don't care. I just want to see it at this point. So that is all the news and releases I have for you. And as always, as these shows come closer to release, I will remind you of the fact. Let's go over what's trending, what's the top 10 on Netflix right now as we speak. Coming at number 10, The Half of It, which is a Netflix original show. Number 9, The Last Kingdom, which I finally watched the first episode. Netflix show number 8, Murder to Mercy. It's a docuseries. Number 7, the Nick Nolte-led Den of Thieves. Just kidding. Gerard Butler, Den of Thieves, coming at number 7. Number 6, Extraction with Chris Hemsworth. Number 5, Never Have I Ever. Number 4, All Day and Night, another Netflix original. Number 3, the Netflix original Hollywood. Number 2, the Netflix original Outer Banks. Number 1, Dangerous Lies, and that is a full feature film. That is your top 10 trending on Netflix right now. Now, I said this a couple times on previous shows. My VP, who I have no problems with, well, I don't have any TV problems with the VP. Anyway, she gets up for work, kids go to bed. She doesn't really watch too much television these days. So actually, during this quarantine, she is watching some more television. So I just kind of let her watch what she wants to watch, and I kind of piggyback off of that. That leads me into my first review. she stumbled on a show called Waco. It's a 6-episode miniseries. It was actually on the Paramount channel. Came out in 2018, which I think used to be Spike TV. It is the channel that the Kevin Costner Yellowstone or Yellowbeard show is on. It's the Paramount channel. Right now, the show is sitting at 68% critic score with a 75% audience score. And I have to say off the bat, I was kind of hooked into the show. As the title would indicate, this show is about David Koresh and his, I think they called them Davidians. That's what I'm going to roll with. And this all took place in 1993, which is why it was kind of intriguing to me, because 1993, let's kick it to the throwback machine here. I was a sophomore in high school, so at that time, do I watch headlines now? No. Did I watch headlines back in high school? Fuck no. So I knew the name, I knew the outcome, but I didn't bother to follow, read, or do anything about what actually transpired. So that's what kind of drew me in. This is an absolutely fantastic cast. That was the other part that drew me in, where Tyler Cleese playing David Koresh, and man, he lost some weight to play this role. He looked just like him. If you go look up pictures and compare him side to side, looks just like him. And I know a lot of people are down on him. I'm not saying he's the greatest actor, but I felt like Hollywood tried to give him a push too early in his career coming off of Friday Night Lights. And that happens. I'm not going to blame the guy for taking a shit ton of parts, but they all turn out to be bombs. So if you never watched Friday Night Lights, he played Gambit in that terrible Wolverine movie. And then he went on to that John Carter Disney movie. And then he followed that up with that god-awful Battleship movie. And then even more, even though I kind of like this movie, because it had Aaron Taylor Johnson as well as Blake Lively. The Oliver Stone directed Savages. I did like that movie, but it did nothing. After that, he got relegated to... He got put on the shelf for a while. And he's been working on side roles like True Detective Season 2. I thought he did a great job in that series. And now he's... you're starting to see a little bit more of him. So he's an okay actor. He's not great. He's not terrible. I compared his Hollywood push to Jai Courtney, but he has way more talent than Jai Courtney has. So I hope this guy does eventually kind of make it back. Not to like A-list status probably ever, but we get to see him a little bit more. Because he is, like I said, he does have some talent. He's not void of talent. So he plays David Koresh. You also have Michael Shannon, which this is also produced by. He plays the lead FBI negotiator. You also have Julia Garner, a.k.a. Ruth Langmore from Ozark. You have Melissa Benoist, a.k.a. Supergirl on the CW. You have Macaulay Culkin's little brother, Rory Culkin, and you actually have John Leguizamo. So this is a great cast. If you're familiar with the story, you have Koresh and his Davidians in this compound in Waco. It's almost cultish. He's, I don't want to say pride, but he's a very religious zealot who people just automatically draw themselves to. And he ends up forming this church in this compound where people come to study the Bible and live with them and carry on. But for some reason, they have a stockpile of illegal guns as well. Now, I'm going to stop that right there because the other part of this is through the ATF, who has a bad rap in the early 90s. They're coming off a botched mission, and they're just receiving a bunch of bad PR. You have Michael Shannon's character, again, who plays the lead FBI negotiator. He does not believe in violence. He believes everything could be settled through negotiation. So this series picks up at two different points. You have the Koresh and his followers, and you have Michael Shannon with an incident that happens before he gets called into Waco, which kind of sets the backstory for him and his partner at the time. Because his partner now, when they get to Waco, is in charge of the tactical side, while he's in charge of negotiating, and they're constantly butting heads. So this standoff takes place for 51 days. It was a 51-day standoff. Now, if you read some of the mini reviews or clips, some of the downers on the show was they try to show sympathy towards David Koresh and his followers. I didn't find it that way, because when you watch this series, he comes off as an egotistical, maniacal, selfish, self-right kind of person. So I did not sympathize with David Koresh at all. Now, I feel, was generally trying to help his church and his people. I actually felt worse for the people who joined him, because they just, how can I put this? I hate talking about religion, but they they blindly followed him, which you could poke fun at people who do that, but they were there for genuine reasons, and they weren't bothering anybody. That's the thing. They weren't bothering anybody. They didn't rope anyone into their church. But what started this whole thing, standoff, is the ATF was looking to get good PR. So they had some intel where David Koresh had a bunch of illegal guns. So they sent John Leguizamo in there to try to infiltrate and find out where the gun storage was so they can seize the guns and arrest David Koresh and some of his followers. Well, that fucking blew up from the get-go. That blew up from the get-go. The ATF screwed the pooch royally, and they were totally at fault in the beginning of this show. And then they call the FBI in, who actually takes over the negotiations and the tactics from here on out. And that's where this show gets very interesting. So I don't think they really make you pick a side, because you get both the FBI side and the Davidian side. And you kind of, I'm somewhere in the middle. Now, me personally, I would have left that church and just walked outside and just surrendered. The tactics the FBI used, very questionable. And then Michael Shannon's character actually got booted off the case because he was not making progress fast enough. And that's where the finale kind of snowballs, and you see how all these people ended up dying, which was just horrendous. It was horrendous. While I was watching this show, it's mind-boggling to me how some people can get elevated into leadership positions in these organizations when they don't really know what the fuck they're doing. Now, coming personally myself from a military background, this whole thing was foobarred from the get-go. And if you don't know what foobarred is, it's just fucked up beyond all recognition. That's an actual term that we use, and it just was. It just was a foobarred situation. So the initial strike and raid on the compound was all on the ATF. What happened at the end, and I don't want to spoil this for you. I mean, you know what happens to David Koresh, but what happens at the end, it's just a sad state that I feel that could have been avoided. Or it's a little slice of history in the 90s that I just totally brushed aside. But based on the cast and the acting, give this a watch. Everyone does a great job. And it does, for 6 episodes, I feel it's the right amount of time for this show. Actually, what would help you is if you watch this miniseries and then go actually read what happened, it'll fucking blow your mind. Especially at the end of this series where they tell you what the FBI's official statements were after this series. It'll make you mad at the government just a little bit. And Michael Shannon, to me, is one of the best character actors going around right now. So it's on Netflix, 6 episodes. I go way higher than both the critics and the audience. I'm going to give Waco a solid 4.0 out of 5 for me. But the movie of the week, and I wish I could have just got this out to you sooner, was the Chris Hemsworth-led Erection, which is sitting at 65%, which is criminal. It's critic score and a 70% audience score. Directed by Sam Hargraves. First full feature film for Hargraves. But this is a note, he was the fight choreographer on Atomic Blonde and a bunch of other movies. So he has some chops in that aspect, stunt choreography as well. And you can see the similarities between the fight scenes in Erection and Atomic Blonde. Okay, so here we go. Let me just dive right into this fucking movie. And this movie is actually based on a graphic novel by the Russo brothers, who also produced this movie as well. So yeah, you have Chris Hemsworth as the lead, Taylor Rake, who is ex-military but now turned mercenary for hire. And the very first scene of this movie kind of shows you where he just does not give a fuck anymore. As his handler put it at some point in this film, he's just spinning the chamber, hoping to catch a bullet. So he's a troubled person, much like Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon. But when I first started watching this movie, I automatically thought of Man on Fire. Similar type of movie. I mean, honestly, there's tons of movies like this. You have a military person who just wants to end his life, but just keeps going on for their own personal reasons. So he gets tasked with extracting this drug lord's son, who was kidnapped by his rival. So you have 2 drug lords in 2 different territories in India, and one kidnaps the other. So he's set on a mission to go in and extract him, and he gets paid and the kid gets returned to safety. This is where the movie goes fucking crazy. So the action comes fast and furious in this movie. So once you have your initial action, your first scene was Chris Hemsworth, you meet the kid. The kid actually has a bodyguard himself, which we found out more about him later. His dad is in prison. So knowing this, the other drug lord kidnaps his son. Chris Hemsworth goes in there with his team. So Chris Hemsworth goes in there, tries to extract the kid. That's where you have your first action scene, and that's where you can see the choreography come into play. Fucking brutal, beautifully executed violence by Chris Hemsworth in this. Some great fight scenes. It is uber violent, so if you're not used to that kind of stuff, just close your eyes here. So he ends up actually rescuing the kid, but en route to going to his extraction point, he's been double-crossed. So this is the first turn in the movie. And from there on out, it's just him against the drug lord and everybody else in India. We find out he's been double-crossed by the kid's bodyguard, who has his own reason for doing what he's doing. So what I felt, and I know I'm just goddamn all over the place in this movie, they try to make you sympathize with this kid's bodyguard. And at first, because I watched this movie twice, I watched it with the VP the second time, I watched it alone the first time. And I must have missed some lines in the first time because I was like, I don't give a fuck about this guy. Whatever, just get him off the screen. You do. You kind of sympathize in his actions on why he tries to double cross Chris Hemsworth. So you have Chris Hemsworth keeping away from the drug lord and the bodyguard while trying to find an exit strategy and get this kid to safety. So it seems like the entire armies in India are after him and this kid. So this movie really picks up steam in the first act of the movie is where a lot of your action is. The second act, they do try to establish some emotional connection between the kid, which is his name is Ovi, and Chris Hemsworth's character, and it kind of works. It's not so much the Man on Fire connection with Denzel Washington, but it is what it is. So Chris Hemsworth has a troubled past as well. We find out he has some tragic history with his son that comes out, so maybe that plays into a part of it. It becomes a story of redemption rather than the money grab. David Harbour does a great job for the one scene he's in this movie, and he comes in the second act, but everything's kind of telegraphed. That's one thing I didn't like. It was telegraphed. You kind of knew what his character was going to do with Chris Hemsworth, and after that, Chris Hemsworth had to regroup and try to figure shit out. I felt like the second act was a little slow, and then the third act. Holy shit. I mean, you get Chris Hemsworth. He has his final confrontation with the bodyguard. I'm not going to spoil anything for you there. And that whole last scene is bananas. Now, there is a scene, sorry, I know I'm backtracking a little bit, before David Harbour rescues him, where the rival drug lord, the one that kidnapped the kid, sends out these kids to kind of be his eyes and ears and find Tyler Rake within India. And they do track him down, and there's a fight scene that ensues after that. That was my favorite fucking part of the movie. Because there's nothing worse you can do to a guy or a kid in a fight than just open hand slap them in the fucking face. There's nothing. Not even a kick in the balls. I would take a kick in the balls before I take an open hand slap in the face. So, but the fight scenes were just great. I thought this is the Chris Hemsworth show. And I know this review was just all over the goddamn place. But it's that type of movie. Now, it's not like The Raid or anything, but the action scenes, but the body count is really high. And Chris Hemsworth, he did a lot of his own stunts. What I read in this movie, it comes through. They feel genuine. Everything feels like it's in a flow when it comes to the action. Now, there are certain parts of this film that you can tell is a little bit CGI, but the gunplay, the tactical stuff, the fighting, some of the deaths, some of the fights, it's just great. You know what this movie did? This movie did what all good action movies should do. It should make you erect. I had a full erection watching this fucking movie. Girls too, don't worry. There's enough to make you erect as well. You have Chris Hemsworth, who is my VP's number one guy right now. I love the first act. I love the third act. The second act was just okay. It was a little bit on the longer side. They could have probably trimmed this movie by 15, 20 minutes. In the ending, all I'm going to tell you is when you get done watching this, actually click and research the ending to Erection, and it'll kind of fill you in, because if I do, it's going to spoil everything for you. Now, just before I came on the air, Netflix is actually working on a sequel to this movie, as well they should. I'm going to say this is top 3. Yeah, it's top 3, at least top 2 of any Netflix original action movie. Not movie, action movie. I don't know what else you could expect out of an action movie. Yes, you can go watch Man of Fire. It actually has some similarities to Punisher Season 2 with the Frank Castle and that preacher storyline. I also thought about that. But yeah, it's if you like great fight choreography and great action, Chris Hemsworth pulls it off, which goes to my thought last week. This guy should be more. Stop taking fucking Men in Black roles and all that bullshit and just take better roles. Like, even if it's this is probably the best thing he's done outside of fucking Thor. So I don't know what the critics were thinking. Is this a paint by numbers? Sure. Have we seen this movie 10 times before? Yes. But Chris Hemsworth is why you go watch this movie. I go higher than the critics and the fucking audience on this one. I'm going to give Erection a 4.25 out of 5 for me. That's it, folks. That's all I have for you. This has actually ended up being a little bit longer episode than I anticipated. But anyway, stay safe, social distance, all that bullshit. But until then, go check me out on the Facebook Media Mosh. Go check me out on the Twitterverse at Shane Media Mosh. More importantly, people, go to the Apple Podcast Store, download me, share me with your friends, and then circle back and go check out Mr. Argue Myself, Chris Rodell, on the Instagram, the Twitters, and the Facebook. 3 different platforms for 3 different types of content. Until then, folks, have a great week. Get caught up. Get caught up in the mosh.